Robert was the usual suspect. Just give me 1 second. I need to get something set so that we can get all this started. But today we'll be speaking all matters Manchester United, and we're going to be talking about their goalkeeping dilemma, that among other things. So we pretty much know what happened yesterday in their game against Newcastle. I hope you guys are able to hear me. Sometimes my microphones do act up, but yes. So like I was saying, we all pretty much know what happened yesterday. You'll forgive the background noise. There's somebody trying to hammer through a bit of walls and that kind of stuff in the nearby neighborhood there. But following yesterday's action, in which Manchester United suffered a 4-1 defeat at Newcastle, a lot of questions have been raised in regards to what Ruben Amorim's decision will be in a match, in a potentially season-defining game when they entertain Olympic Lyon at the Old Trafford in the return leg of the quarterfinals of the UEFA Europa League. So, and here is why this is very important, because following last Thursday's action between United and Lyon, Manchester United goalkeeper Andre Onana made 2 costly mistakes that ended with United losing their would-be 2-1 advantage, at least at the time, prior to the return leg, and then it ended in a 2-2 draw. So that put United at a bit of a disadvantage, because I'm sure they would have loved to return home with that 2-1 at least victory, to capitalize on that, to propel themselves into the semi-finals. However, the costly mistakes of Onana sort of let Manchester United down, and they did return to home soil and visited Newcastle, where they lost terribly by 4-1. Like I said in yesterday's podcast, pretty much I did expect Manchester United to lose, but the manner in which they lost is one that I did not expect. And here's why. While they've had that bad a season, they've oftentimes been able to reduce the margin within which they lose. Because sometimes, yes, you lose a game. It's always bad to lose for any team, big or small. But when you're a big team like Manchester United, it matters by what goal margin you also lose, because you do not want those embarrassing defeats, the kinds that we've seen elsewhere, like like the way Barcelona humiliated Dortmund, beating them by 4-0. When we're talking about the 2024 UEFA Champions League losing finalists. So yesterday, Manchester United, maybe another example is Arsenal beating up against Man City by 5-1. I think last season, either last season or last season but one, Liverpool humiliated Manchester United in a 7-0 thumping. So oftentimes when you're a big club, you want to avoid those embarrassing defeats. And yesterday, one would have hoped that United would have tried to avoid that. Now, like I said, the game came at a time when they really do not have much to play for beyond their reputation as far as the league table is concerned and where they finished at the end of the season. Because while winning that particular fixture would have earned them a couple of points to send them maybe higher up on the table, it would still retain them on page 2 of the Premier League table, or the bottom half. So, because the game in itself had no bearing, but they still had their reputation to play for. While Newcastle, on the other side, had strong pursuits because they are trying to finish in the top 5 and qualify for next season's UEFA Champions League. So they have a strong objective, a strong case to make for themselves in that respect. So changes were expected to be made to that Manchester United starting 11. And there were changes, of course. But the most notably was Andre Onana being left out of the matchday squad, and Altay was pitted or was brought into the starting lineup. And I do think that the Dutch international is a great goalkeeper. But the moment in which he comes into this particular fixture was one that came with a bit of its own pressure. One, Manchester United fans are disappointed in their goalkeeping situation following Andre Onana's mistakes. Two, you're playing an away game to Newcastle, so that really doesn't help much with all the Newcastle fans sort of with that loud banter and noise in your ears while you're trying to concentrate on the game. Not that it reduces your concentration levels, but trust me that it can be nagging. It can be like a mosquito buzzing within your ear or close by, and that kind of thing. So pretty much that kind of environment. It's a bit of a hostile environment for a player to be playing in when you're being called to action, to be more or less the savior of the club. And I do think I would want to believe, honestly, that in the first half, he did that really, really well. And for the better part of the game, I thought he did that really well. Until, of course, late on in the game when then he plays that pass that he intended to look over a couple of players and find a Manchester United player somewhere in midfield, but then Joelinton steals that ball. Yes, Mazda, thank you for tuning to the broadcast. You're saying Glazers out. Well, we'll speak about the Glazers in a bit. Just stay on the broadcast and we'll have that engagement in a bit. So that was the kind of profile game that Altay Bayindir was coming into, and United fans did expect that when everything else fails, let's have the goalkeeper to save us. And the reason as why the goalkeeping situation or goalkeeping position at Manchester United is very, very comes under a lot of scrutiny. Not that it comes under a lot of scrutiny at United more than it does at any other club, but it is largely for Manchester United. It's because of their goalkeeping history. They've had some really great goalkeepers in their history. When you look at the likes of Peter Schmeichel, very great goalkeeper. Arguably, one would argue that the best goalkeeper in the Premier League era. And of course, that would be debatable in some circles. When you have a goalkeeper like Petchek, who conceded just 15 goals, I think in the 2024-2025, sorry, in the 2004-2005 Premier League season, under the charges of Jose Mario Frex Mourinho. I think other goalkeepers would make that case in terms of who has been the best overall. But because of the likes of Peter Schmeichel, because of the likes of Edwin van der Sar, for those of you that remember, Edwin van der Sar, Manchester United signing him for Fulham, and he came and did the magic at Manchester United. Never mind that he always fell to either to Martin Gams-Pedersen or or Viduka, who was at Middlesbrough at the time. Of course, Martin Gams-Pedersen at Blackburn at the time. But that notwithstanding, overall, he was a very great goalkeeper. And then, when, of course, the goalkeepers for whom it did not really work out, the likes of the likes of Thomas Kozak, the likes of Tim Howard, the likes of Ben Foster, in between there, for whom things didn't really fare out really well overall on the larger scale. Anders Lingard, on the larger scale, for those goalkeepers, it didn't really fare out well. But in the broader context of things, then they had a David De Gea, who arguably was their best player for at least different 5 seasons, and he was being voted the best goalkeeper. Now, that clearly communicates something to you, really. It communicates something to you that the importance of that goalkeeper. For me, my argument has always been that every time you have the goalkeeper stealing the show, that means you've had a poor defense or a poor midfield, but then also it doesn't take away the goodness or the prowesses of the attacking or the offense of the opposing side. And clearly, that has always been part of the debate, but it does not take away the fact that Manchester United goalkeepers historically have been really, really good. When you look at David De Gea, Kutana, who they did let go after Erik ten Hag's first season in quite humiliating style. We all spoke about that. The contract was tabled for him, and later it was pulled from right under his feet, and they decided to let him go. What, you want to give me $1,000 or $100? Thank you, but thank you for tuning the broadcast. So, and then you had Peter Schmeichel, you had Edwin van der Sar, and that kind of thing. So clearly, any Manchester United goalkeeper, regardless of who they bring, because in between there, while they were trying to find their feet, they tried out Dean Henderson. Hello, bro. Yes, voila. Thank you for tuning to the broadcast. Much appreciated. Thanks for the comment. So, You had Dean Henderson in there, who they eventually let go to join Crystal Palace. So overall, the goalkeeping position at Manchester United is very, very crucial to how they play and to be the position that wins them a game when things have not really gone well elsewhere on this side of the pitch. So in recent times, they've come under scrutiny because of the goalkeeping situation. And here's why. Andre Onana, 29 years of age, ever since the start of last season, he's made the most errors leading to goals than any other goalkeeper in the Premier League. He's made 8 errors that have led to a goal. So that's why he comes oftentimes under scrutiny. But then also, when you look at the numbers, when you look at the stats, and in terms of when you compare minutes played and saves per 90 minutes, he has the highest percentage in comparison to recent Manchester United goalkeepers, including David De Gea, who has the most minutes in the last 20 years, because this is a comparison of Manchester United goalkeepers for the last 20 years. And in there you have players like Edwin van der Sar, players like Tim Howard, players like Ben Foster, who we all know is now since retired. So you have that kind of comparison, and he has the most saves per 90 minutes. Now, as impressive as that is, it also tells you much about the Manchester United backline, because they've not had a good defense in as long as I can remember, really. Ever since the departure or the retirement of Rio Ferdinand, Nemanja Vidic, yes, you struggle to remember, or you would really have a long discussion or debate trying to find who has arguably been Manchester United's best defender since then. Because look at the likes of Phil Jones, Harry Maguire, Chris Smalling, Akzoto Ansebe, although not a mainstay in that backline, have all been tried out. Lisandro Martinez, very good player, by the way, who unfortunately has been hard done by injuries overall. And then, so you look at all that. Now they brought in Eleni Euro, they brought in Matthias De Ligt. On profile, they're all good defenders, but they've not been perhaps as good as their predecessors in Rio Ferdinand, in Vidic. So there's that comparison. And because the defense has always been that poor, you've had the Manchester United goalkeeper have a lot to do in terms of keeping the team in a game, in terms of winning them games, in terms of winning them points, in terms of leading them to trophies. Because during that spell, ever since the retirement of Sir Alex Ferguson, United have won pieces of silverware, and over time, we've spoken about those, including a cup double in 2017 under Jose Mourinho when they won the Carabao Cup and the UEFA Europa League. You know, I think they beat up against Ajax by 2-0 in the finals. So then in 2016, they won the FA Cup. 2023, they won the FA Cup, beating up against Man City in the finals 2-1. I think it was Marcus Rashford and was it Bruno Fernandes, whatever the case was. So they've been winning their silverware, but the goalkeeper has always been a crucial part of that component. And Andre Onana was, crucial in that triumph for last season. Now, had it been not for the same Andre Onana, probably Manchester United would have lost the Manchester Derby by maybe 1-0. But so, like, I think, who was it that said it? But somebody did say that the goalkeeper, usually it happens, I think, across all fields, either in employment or in human nature. You'll do 1,000 good things, and then the 2 mistakes that you do are the ones that will concentrate on more and critique you. So clearly, Onana is suffering that. So for all the challenges that the entire team is having across the pitch, the team lacking to jail, how they lose possession, how they defend collectively as a team, sometimes players shrugging and all that kind of thing. It has sort of been directed into Onana's path in recent days. Not across the entire campaign, but at least in recent days. So why Ruben Amorim faces the biggest decision arguably of the season is because now he has to choose on Thursday when they face Lyon at Old Trafford who the goalkeeper is going to be. Is it going to be Altay or it is going to be Onana coming back? Roy Keane was speaking about the matter and he did say that he's made so many mistakes, speaking to Andre Onana. And he says possibly the manager does recognize that and he makes a big decision to say, look here, you're my number one goalkeeper, but your recent games have been good enough, so I'm going to leave you out of maybe 1 to 3 games, and so that you get your act back together, and then we can go from there. Now, whether that's the situation, I mean, it's only subject to speculation or interpretation in regards to the manager's decisions until we see otherwise. But that was his view. That's Roy Keane. So, is he going to sit him out for another game, or is going to recall him back to the starting line? Is he going to stick to Altay Bendia and say, I'm not dropping you just because you made a mistake, because you are in goal when we knocked out Arsenal out of the FA Cup on penalties, 5-4 in that one. So, in which he was very impressive across the entire 90 minutes and including extra time. So, are you going to judge him based on the mistake that he made, leading to the 4th goal that Manchester United conceded yesterday, or you're going to look at the positives that prior to that particular incident, in this first half, he had an enormous save to deny Alexander Isak, because Manchester United's game yesterday, they weren't at their best. That we all know. Newcastle dominated affairs. Jacob Murphy missing the first opportunity, fires that ball wide of the mark, and then you had of course, excuse me, you had Nick Pope on the other side make a brilliant save of Joshua Zirkzee's attempt, and then we return this side, Alexander Isak. I think it was a headed opportunity there that he fires out wide of the mark. But in there, he does force also, in another moment, he forces Altay Bendia into a brilliant save. And he keeps the game, I think, was it 1-0 or 0-0 at the time? I think it was 1-0, possibly. Of course, Sandro Tonali, there's an incident where Manchester United defenders and midfielders do not close him down. They leave the gap to him and he takes a shot or an aim at goal. Fortunately for Manchester United, that was fired wide of the mark still. You know, it was off target. But the manner in which United defended or played in that moment tells you what their broader problems have been across the entire season. Is sometimes they lose concentration. You're giving a player that amount of space, a player that you know has the stride, has the potential to hit the target. And what that means is that you're exposing your own goalkeeper, you're leaving them vulnerable, and yet you're supposed to protect them. So that's pretty much what happened. And they will need to do much better going forward. So it's the key decision that faces Ruben Amorim ahead of Thursday's game. Of course, we will wait for the pre-match press conference. I think that will be coming on Wednesday or Tuesday, depending on how much United decide to schedule it. But most probably Wednesday, for the manager to tell us whether Andre Onana will be returning to the matchday squad or it will be Altay Bendia to start in goal as they face Lyon in their pursuit for a semi-final slot in the UEFA Europa League, for which Lazio have Bodo Glimt. Remember, Bodo Glimt did win their first leg by 2-0, while the other fixture, of course, United, it was a 2-2 draw. That much we know, and we all know that it was a goalless draw between Athletic Bilbao and Rangers in the other fixture. So clearly, while the other fixture also between Tottenham and Eintracht Frankfurt ended in a 1-1 draw. So United will have it all to do in regards to wanting to secure their slot in the semi-final. So the goalkeeping situation is going to be potentially a season-defining decision. Why? Because if the right choice is made, it could keep them in the competition. If the wrong decision is made, it could get them knocked out of the competition, for which it is their only chance to silverware this season and possibly their only route into participating in next season's UEFA Champions League, which Manchester United really do need because of their finances. Because you need those Champions League monies to come through and help on your financial situation. We all know that United are really trying to stay on the good side of the profit and sustainability rules of the Premier League, and so that pretty much we do know. So for those of you that missed the review of yesterday's game or the weekend, kindly do check out the live broadcasts. You'll see plenty much of that and more. And then tomorrow or later in the day, we may get a chance to speak about Real Madrid ahead of the return leg with Arsenal. A lot has been said in regards to the kind of atmosphere Real Madrid want to create ahead of that visit from Arsenal. Has been said about the first 15, 20 minutes in regards to how they need to go, but that's it. Anyway, let's not deviate too much. UEFA Champions League will be a matter of tomorrow or later in the evening, depending on what our schedule allows us. Now, still in the context of Manchester United, I see MFC, I think that means Manchester United Football Club, calls himself MUFC Glazers out. He's saying Glazers out, Qatar in. Now, the debate has for long been had that Manchester United fans would want the Glazers out of their club. One, because they think they are more profit-minded as opposed to reinvesting in the club to win trophies and that kind of thing. So it's two-way. And here's what I'll say. They are within their rights to want to make profit, because for them, Manchester United is an investment. They've made an investment in the club, so they need to earn a profit or dividends, whatever you call it, out of the club. That's well within their rights. However, any good businessman knows that you ought to also invest in the business that gives you the profit. Like, you have to keep on reinvesting. And to be fair to the Glazers, I think they've done that. I think they've done that to a certain extent, because United have not been without investment. The unfortunate bit or the historical context is that the Glazers borrowed money to buy Manchester United. So that was a debt on the club that was put on the club's books. Then many other things have since been done. Now, that debt has grown to reach nearly £1 billion, while at the same time, they've been paying interest on that very debt. Because the Glazers came under a lot of pressure and scrutiny from the fans in regards saying, we want you out of the club and all that kind of thing. We all remember the helicopters flying all over Old Trafford, Glazers out, and that kind of thing. They had the message. And what did they do? They sought for an angel investor or an investor to come and join the club. And that's how Sir Jim Ratcliffe came in, bought initially a 25% stake in the club that earned him controlling interest, because he was left to make the footballing decisions or to take day-to-day management of the club. I think he later bought another extra 2.8% in the club to take his shares to about 27% or so on that. So now, unfortunately, it was reported that all the money that the Glazers received from selling that stake in the club, especially the initial 25%, which was near £1 billion or thereabout, was taken by the Glazers. And that's where the criticism does come from. Now, Ever since then, it's been over a year that Sir Jim Ratcliffe came on with his controlling group of Ineos. They've managed the day-to-day affairs. We know all the actions they've taken. We know how they've cut spending costs. We know how they convinced Sir Alex Ferguson to let him out of his ambassadorial contract that earned him at least £2 million per year. So they wrote that one off to save money. They cut out parties. They cut out the players fund. We are talking about players that played, I think, prior to it being called the Premier League. There was a fund which cost the club, I think, about £40,000 per year, something like that. And I remember, I think Gary Neville submitting saying, "Why don't you just host a dinner and auction signed jerseys, maybe your signed jersey of Bruno Fernandes, and raise the £40,000 and give it to these people, as opposed to just writing them off and hanging them out to dry?" And Sergio Ratcliffe at the time, in that interview, said it's not a suggestion that had come to their table, but now that it had come through, maybe they will consider it. We all know that they did make redundancies, or about 250 of them, at Manchester United. That was in the first phase. This very month, or in the first quarter of this year, they made another 200 vacancies redundant, and all that was geared to reduce their spending cost. Now, again, in comparison to Manchester United's own expenditure, especially when it comes to player wages and all that, for all the positions they've cut down, and most of these people, it's cents on a dollar, really, really. I know they did, I think, was it a social psychologist? One of those that they made redundant was earning about what, £250,000 annually. So many decisions have been made to make sure that United stay afloat. So while you're clamoring for the Glazers to be out, and yes, they have a big part in this, the sides in recent times have been on Sir Jim Ratcliffe and his management cohort. We all know that they spent money on bringing in Dan Ashworth from Newcastle. For long, he had been placed on gardening leave at Newcastle and eventually joined Manchester United. 5 months later, he's knocked out. He's fired. And a lot of money was spent in compensating his contract. A lot of money was spent on recruiting him from Newcastle. And just like that, in under a year, you made a loss on him. Why? Because possibly, I think they didn't see eye to eye on certain decisions with Omar Barreda, who is the current Manchester United CEO, formerly at Manchester City, and that kind of thing. So United themselves have made costly mistakes. When you look at player investment, I do not think it was the Glazers who said sign Anthony for that lots of money, and it didn't work out. So United have signed players, have invested in players in recent times, thanks to the Glazers, who you're saying Glazers out. But unfortunately, they've invested either in the wrong players or they've invested in the wrong system, because there's more to blame than just the coaches and the players. You brought Anthony, it didn't work out. Tyler last year, it didn't work out. Casemiro, it has not, on a larger context, and based on what was invested in bringing him, it has not worked out. Rasmus Højlund signed for £72 million from Atlanta. It has not really paid off really well. Joshua Zirkzee just signed yesterday. It's not looked pretty for him this season. You let go of Mason Greenwood for reasons we pretty much well know. Marcus Rashford's poor performance, that's not down to the Glazers. That was before he departed to Aston Villa on a season on loan until the rest of the season. You had an investment in Jadon Sancho from Borussia Dortmund for what, £73 million. That has not really paid off. So a lot has happened at Manchester United, while you want to blame the Glazers, there's more to it than just the Glazers. Because in terms of player investment, they've done that. It's then the recruitment that becomes questionable, not the money that was availed to sign the very players. Of course, due to shortage of finances, there are questions on whether Manchester United will be able to afford Victor Gyökeres, in whom they have interest, given that he's a former player for Ruben Amorim at Sporting Lisbon. So there's that contemplation. United will need to make some player sales to raise revenue to reinvest. So, as the Glazers, the ultimate problem, I'd want to argue that they are part of the problem, but entirely not the problem. So, Ruben Amorim and Sir Jim Ratcliffe are trying to sort out that hierarchy, that whole structure at the club. We remember Cristiano Ronaldo going about the old technology at Carrington, the training ground. And that, of course, did not really help much. Was that the decision of the Glazers to keep it the way it was, or somebody more senior could have, made a better argument in terms of having the training ground revamped? Of course, it has since been revamped, and Cristiano Ronaldo has been exonerated. You had the leaking roof at Old Trafford. Somebody had to make the decision to have that repaired, and because that person did not make the decision, of course, the players got to be blamed. So, in terms of running the day-to-day affairs, what the Glazers simply did was employ people. What was his name? The former Manchester United chief executive, Wood something. He was always there. So, yes, you want the Glazers out and the Qatari in. Now, of course, the assumption is that the new owners would come with large chunks of money, invest in the club, and that kind of thing. Do not forget that that investments are curtailed or to a certain level. That's why Newcastle, even with their new Saudi owners, they cannot just bring in the oil money and pump it into Newcastle. Otherwise, they will have flouted the profit and sustainability rules that demand that you reinvest based on what you make. And they've made the move to cap loans that clubs can get from their owners. Arsenal has been one of those clubs in recent times who have always looked to KSE, that's Kroenke's, the Kroenke, group that does the investment. They've always looked to them for loans to reinvest in the club. Now, those loans would be written as coming from their investors to the club. Now, because of that, the Premier League is moving to cap that. So, even when you get a rich Qatari, person, it would very good. It would spur investment, but also remember that there is a curtailment or there is a cap beyond which they cannot go. Maybe what the new investor would do is pay off their debt, and in paying off their debt, it would then buy them leeway in their books to, invest much more. We were speaking about earlier on in the season, or some time back, about the 11 players that could leave Manchester United at the end of the season, and I told you guys that do not expect Manchester United to go into this summer transfer window and spend as much as 300 million pounds. It may not really be possible. Not because they cannot get the money to invest, but because of the rules that they have to abide by. So they would have to look to sell players. Some of the players who they really wouldn't want to sell. We all know the contract situation between Manchester United and Kobe Mino that has dragged on. Then you've invested already in players for whom it has not really worked out. Mason Mount from Chelsea. I doubt. I would want to think that there are some Manchester United fans out there that until they see him on the pitch, they do not remember he's a Manchester United player. So then there's a situation with Jordan Sancho. United are still unsure whether Chelsea will pay the 25 million pounds in the obligation to buy, or they will instead choose to pay the 5 million pounds of the fine should they choose not to buy. Then you have all that. Marcus Rashford, how much is he going to fetch you? The speculation is anywhere between 40 to 60 million pounds. I do not think Aston Villa will spend 60 million pounds on Marcus Rashford. 40, maybe yes, but 60 could be a reach for Aston Villa. We all know Aston Villa themselves, did have to sell players like Douglas Luiz, who moved to Juventus to try and raise money. That is because they also went and spent big on signing Amadou Onana from Everton. So there are books to be balanced in that mix. Then you want to let go of Alejandro Garnacho, who was of interest from who was of interest to Napoli and Chelsea. You want another striker. You have Joshua Zirkzee, who you just signed, and then you have Rasmus Højlund. Are you letting one of them go, or you want to keep all of them and still sign another player? You have a whole defense to reinvest in. While you bought Lenioro quite expensively, Manuel Ugarte for the midfield quite expensively, Matas Delit quite expensively, Patrick Togo quite expensively, that left back position is yet to be filled. Are you going to let go of Diego Dalot when you've already let go of Aaron Wan-Bissaka? So who will be the backup? You've invested in Mazoroi, very good player. Although yesterday he made a costly mistake, it was his slip that led Harvey Barnes into scoring that third goal on the day. So a lot of investment needs to be done in Manchester United. The Glazers, unfortunately, cannot break the bank to do that because then they will flout the rules. So United have to be smart about this. They'll have to look going the Chelsea way, where you give players longer contracts so that you spread out payments. That, for example, if you're signing a player for 70 million pounds, that player is on a 7-year contract for which you're going to spend 10 million pounds per season for you to stay within the means or the length of those rules. So there's pretty much plenty going on at Manchester United for the Glazers. I do understand the frustration of the Glazers out. Arsenal fans had similar frustrations when before the Kroenkes took over fully, although some would have wanted Alisher Usmanov to take over fully at the time, but it's the Kroenkes that won the day. We've since, maybe it was a great good because ever since the Russia-Ukrainian war, we all know what has happened to Russian club owners. That's what took out Romano Abramovich out of Chelsea, and they now have Tony Body. So look at the example of Chelsea. New owners, a lot of investment, but now they are going to be penalized by UEFA for flouting rules, the financial fair play rules. Because when they found themselves in a tough situation, what they did was sell their ladies club, that is Chelsea women's side, to one of their investors, their co-owners, for what, 150 million pounds? A valuation that UEFA says, first of all, is not worth it. Two, they do not even consider it, while the Premier League on the other side have considered it. And they're waiving go of the profit and sustainability rules. So you have to really tread carefully here. Should the Glazers leave? I think what most people need to understand is that whenever you see an American investor, they're all about the money. I do not think they are more, they're really passionate about football as the likes of Romano Abramovich, who was sort of obsessed with winning. I do not think they are like the likes of these Man City owners who have been obsessed with winning. But the reason as why even Man City owners were obsessed with winning is because of the kind of image that Manchester City paints for them beyond, being investors in English football. There's something it translates to back home, the Etihad Airways and that kind of thing, and everything the Etihad Airways and everything in between. So clearly, Manchester United fans, do let me know what your thoughts are on the Glazers. Yes, I understand you want them out, but I would also want to really urge you that while they are them for a lot that has not gone right, I think in terms of the culture, the general overall culture at the club, the overall being at the club. So United need retrospection or look inwards. And Ruben Amorim has spoken about some of these things, about what players do when they get days off and that kind of thing. We're into 40 minutes of this live broadcast, and we're discussing everything Manchester United. But and I appreciate you guys for always tuning into this broadcast. And those of you that do watch it later, I do not take your time for granted. I thank you for always, choosing to watch Footballtribeug UG. Thank you for subscribing. And if you're new, do not forget to listen. Click that subscribe button and join the community of Footballtribeug UG. So, in conclusion, I do not think that Glazers, unless they're given a very, very juicy offer, because they've been found to be over demanding, or their demands for Manchester United have been found to be north of what the investors expect. So they've made it difficult for people to buy the whole club. That's how Jim Ratcliffe ended up buying just part of the club. And I do not think they really want to go away. I think for all their investments, Manchester United could be the cash cow. While they are not doing well on the pitch, they're still working a lot of money through commercial deals, through funds coming to Old Trafford. You have a 70,000 seater stadium that is always filled to capacity every match day, literally, for what? For more than 30 games in a campaign across different competitions. So there's that. The motivation for the Glazers to say is there, the willingness for Manchester United fans to force them out is also there. I think it will take maybe boycotts, maybe intense demonstrations. But remember, the Americans, they could go away and sit in the USA and decide to leave everything to Sir Jim Ratcliffe to become the punching bag. And I've seen these reports. Glazers out, Ineos out, everybody out. Anyways, allow me to wrap it here and say, do let me know what your thoughts are. But do not forget, Fulham and Bournemouth are on tonight, 10 p.m. East African time. That's the kickoff. In the Spanish La Liga, there's Atletico Madrid will be up against rival Derigi, while Napoli will be up against Empoli in the Italian Serie A, and then Hull City will be up against Coventry City in the Championship. And then, of course, we do it all over for the return leg of the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then the UEFA Europa League and the UEFA Conference League on Thursday. That's all the action that will be coming your way across during the course of the week. So do look out for all that action. And otherwise, allow me to end it here and wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Stay blessed. See you next time. Bye-bye.